The city was alive with noise and movement. Cars honked, people walked quickly on the sidewalks, and the warm sunlight poured down between tall buildings. In the middle of this busy city was a small cafe, a place where people stopped to rest for a moment, to drink coffee or eat a snack. The cafe was not fancy, but it was cozy and filled with the smell of fresh bread and strong coffee. Amara sat alone at a small wooden table near the window. Her dark skin shone softly in the sunlight. Her hair was braided carefully, and she wore a simple blue dress that moved gently as she shifted in her seat. In her hands she held a notebook, filled with words and phrases from many different languages. Her eyes scanned the pages with focus and care. Amara was special. She was a young woman who had learned to speak 9 languages. 9. Many people in the world spoke 1 or 2 languages, maybe 3. But 9 was rare, almost impossible for most. For Amara, it was a journey she had worked hard for, a dream she had chased since she was a child. As she wrote quietly in her notebook, the cafe buzzed around her. People came and went. Some were busy talking on their phones, others laughed with friends, and a few sat alone like her, lost in their own thoughts. At the next table sat a man named Richard. He was tall and wore a sharp suit, the kind of man who looked very rich and powerful. Richard was a millionaire businessman, and he was used to getting what he wanted. He sipped his expensive coffee while scrolling on his phone, his eyes half closed in boredom. Suddenly, a young barista walked past Amara's table and asked in a polite voice, "How would you like your croissant, miss?" Amara smiled and answered softly, but not in English. She said the words in French, "Un croissant au beurre, s'il vous plaît." The barista blinked, surprised but pleased to hear the French words. "Bien sûr," she said, and went to get the croissant. Richard's eyes opened wide. He looked at Amara and laughed loudly. "Did you hear that?" he said, speaking loudly enough for others to hear. "She just spoke French in a cafe here like it's nothing. I bet she can't even speak 1 language well." Amara heard him but did not look angry. Instead, she smiled quietly and said, "I speak 9 languages." Richard laughed again, this time more sharply. 9 languages? That's a joke. No one can speak 9 languages fluently. It's too hard. Amara looked at Richard calmly. "I can, and if you want, I can prove it." Richard was surprised. No one had ever challenged him like that before. Usually people agreed with him or stayed quiet. But here was this young woman, proud and confident, ready to show her skills. He was curious, and a little amused. "All right," Richard said, leaning back in his chair. "If you really speak 9 languages, then show me. Say something in each one. Let me hear it." Amara nodded and closed her notebook. She stood up and smiled at the small crowd now watching them. "I will," she said softly. First, she spoke in French, the same language she had just used to order. Her voice was smooth and clear. "Bonjour, comment ça va?" she said. It meant, "Hello, how are you?" A few people in the cafe smiled, recognizing the language. Then she switched to Spanish. "¿Dónde está la estación de tren?" she asked, meaning, "Where is the train station?" The barista nodded in understanding, impressed. Next came Mandarin Chinese. The words sounded very different and musical. "Ni hao, ni chi le ma? Ni hao, ni chi le ma?" Which means, "Hello, have you eaten?" Some heads turned, surprised by the foreign sounds. Amara continued, moving to Japanese, saying, "O Genki desu ka? O Genki desu ka?" Meaning, "How are you?" Then she spoke Arabic, "Kaif halak? Kaifa halak?" Again asking, "How are you?" After that, she switched to Swahili. "Habari gani?" Meaning, "What's the news?" Then the Russian, "Как дела?" "Как дела?" Also meaning, "How are you?" She didn't stop. Next was German, "Wie geht's?" Meaning, "How's it going?" Finally, she spoke Hindi, "Aap kaise hain? Aap kaise hain?" Which means, "How are you?" The room was silent. No one had ever heard anything like this. Richard's face changed. His smile disappeared. His eyes were wide with surprise. "Is that true?" he asked quietly. "Can you really speak all those languages?" Amara nodded. "Yes, I can. And more than just words, I understand the people, their culture, and their hearts." Richard didn't know what to say. He had thought this would be a joke, something silly to laugh at. But now he was beginning to realize that Amara was different. She was not just a girl who had learned words. She was someone who had opened doors to the world. Richard looked at Amara with new respect. "How did you learn all this?" he asked. Amara smiled, a little shy now. "It was not easy. I studied for many years. I wanted to connect with people, to understand them. Each language is like a key to a new place and new friends. Richard thought about his own life. He had money, power, and success, but he never learned more than one language. He never traveled much outside his business world. Amara's story made him wonder if he was missing something important. The barista brought Amara's croissant and placed it gently in front of her. Amara thanked her in Italian, grazie, and took a small bite, still smiling. The other people in the cafe whispered softly among themselves. Some wanted to ask Amara questions. Others just watched in awe. Richard stood up slowly. "You've surprised me," he said honestly. "I didn't expect this. Maybe I judged too quickly." Amara nodded. "It happens to many people, but the world is bigger than our first thoughts." Richard looked out the window, thinking. He had met many people in his life, but none like Amara. She was young, proud, and talented. She carried a whole world inside her words. "Maybe you can teach me something," Richard said quietly. Amara smiled brighter now. "I would like that." Outside the cafe, the city moved on as always. But inside, two very different people had found a moment of understanding. The black girl who spoke 9 languages and the millionaire who laughed at her had started a story neither of them expected. And it all began with a simple sentence, spoken softly in French. The cafe was still buzzing with quiet excitement. People whispered about Amara and the man who had laughed at her, then been surprised by her skill. Richard, the millionaire, sat back down, his mind spinning with thoughts. How could someone so young know so much? How did she manage to learn all those languages when most people struggled with 1 or 2? Richard was a man of business and facts. He liked clear answers and numbers. But Amara's talent was something different. It was about words, culture, and connection, a world he did not fully understand. He looked at Amara again, sitting calmly at the table, her notebook closed but ready. "If you truly speak 9 languages," he said slowly, "then I want to test you. I want to see if you can really speak all of them, not just greetings or simple phrases, but real conversations." Amara smiled gently. "I understand," she said. "I will do my best," Richard nodded. "Good. Let's begin." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small book. It was a business guide translated into many languages. Richard had picked it up on his last trip abroad but had not used it much. "Here," he said, handing the book to Amara. "Choose a language. Read a passage aloud. Then tell me what it means." Amara took the book carefully. She flipped through the pages, her eyes moving quickly but with care. After a moment, she stopped and pointed to a page written in Russian. She cleared her throat and read slowly but clearly. "В современном мире знания языков открывают двери к новым возможностям." She then looked up and explained, "In today's world, knowledge of languages opens doors to new opportunities." Richard nodded, impressed. "That is correct." "Very good." Amara smiled but did not stop. She turned to a page in German and read, "Sprache verbindet Menschen und baut Brücken zwischen Kulturen." Then she explained, "Language connects people and builds bridges between cultures." The cafe had quieted now. Even the barista and other customers listened, amazed at her skills. Richard continued to challenge her. He handed her the book again and asked for Italian. Amara found the page quickly and read, "Imparare le langue è un viaggio che dura tutta la vita." She said softly, "Learning languages is a journey that lasts a lifetime." Richard nodded again. "You speak well. But what about grammar? What about difficult words?" Amara laughed lightly. "Every language has its challenges, but with patience and practice, they become easier." Richard looked thoughtful. "Then tell me this, why did you start learning languages? What made you want to do this?" Amara's face grew serious for a moment. She put the book down and looked out the window. "When I was a child, I lived in a small town. It was a place where most people only spoke one language, but I dreamed of a bigger world. I wanted to travel, to meet people from different places and to understand their stories." She paused. "I did not have much money. Books and teachers were hard to find, but I found ways to learn. I listened to music, watched movies, and talked to people whenever I could." Slowly, the words began to make sense. Richard listened quietly, feeling respect for her strength and determination. "That is inspiring," he said. "Many people give up when it is hard." Amara smiled again. "I never gave up. I believe that language is more than just words. It is a way to connect hearts. Richard leaned forward. Can you teach me something right now? Teach me a phrase in one of your languages. Amara's eyes lit up. Of course. She chose Swahili and said, Hakuna Matata. Then she explained, it means, no worries. It is a way people say, don't be afraid. Everything will be okay. Richard laughed. I have heard that before. It sounds nice, Amara nodded. It is. It reminds me to stay calm even when things are difficult. Richard looked around the cafe. You know, I spend so much time worried about business and money. Maybe I need to learn to say that to myself more often. Amara's smile grew warmer. Everyone needs reminders like that. At that moment, the barista returned with Amara's croissant and a cup of coffee. On the house, she said kindly, still amazed by Amara's language skills. Amara thanked her in Japanese. Arigato, arigato, meaning thank you. The barista smiled broadly. Richard stood up and looked at Amara seriously. I want to offer you something. You have talent, but it needs more than just passion. It needs support. I want to help you learn more, to travel and to teach others. Amara was surprised. She had never met someone like Richard before. A rich man offering help without expecting anything in return. I don't know what to say, she said softly. Richard smiled. Say yes. Together we can do great things, Amara thought for a moment. Then she nodded. Yes. From that day, a new journey began for both of them. Richard, the businessman, and Amara, the young woman who spoke 9 languages, started to work together. They planned trips, arranged language classes, and even dreamed of opening a school for children who wanted to learn languages but did not have the chance. But their journey was not without challenges. Not everyone believed in Amara's talent. Some thought she was just lucky or that she had help. Others were jealous of her success. One day, as Amara walked through the busy market with Richard, a group of men stopped her. They sneered and said, You think you are better than us because you speak many languages? You are just a girl from the town. Amara held her head high. I am not better. I am just someone who worked hard and followed her dreams. Richard stepped forward. Leave her alone. The men looked at Richard and then at Amara. They walked away without another word. Richard smiled at Amara. You have strength beyond your words. Amara looked at him and said, I learned that strength comes from believing in yourself. The days passed and Amara's fame grew. She was invited to speak at events to share her story. But she always remembered where she came from and why she started. One evening, as she sat with Richard in the same cafe where they first met, she said, Languages are a gift, but the greatest gift is using them to help others. Richard nodded. You have taught me more than words. You have taught me to see the world differently. Amara smiled, feeling a new confidence, and this is only the beginning. Outside, the city light shone bright. People passed by without knowing the story unfolding inside that small cafe. A story of courage, hope, and the power of words. Amara's voice, strong and clear, was ready to reach the world. Amara's story was no ordinary story. Behind her confident smile and easy words lay a journey filled with struggle, hope, and determination. One quiet afternoon, as the city hummed outside the cafe windows, Amara decided to share a part of her past with Richard. They sat at their usual table, a place where many of their important conversations had taken place. Richard watched her closely, waiting to hear the story behind the remarkable girl who spoke 9 languages. Amara took a deep breath. I want to tell you how it all began, she said softly. Richard nodded. I want to hear everything. Amara's voice was calm but strong as she spoke. I was born in a small town. It was not a place many people visited. There were no big buildings or fancy schools. Most families lived simply, and many children never had the chance to travel or learn new things. She paused, remembering the old days. My family did not have much money. My parents worked hard. My mother cleaned houses and my father worked at a market. They wanted me to have a better life. They believed in education, even if it was hard to find. Amara smiled faintly. But my town had one big problem. Almost no one spoke more than one language. It was as if the world ended there. Richard leaned in, curious. How did you learn then? Amara's eyes grew distant, remembering the nights she spent studying. I was lucky. There was a small library in the town. It didn't have many books, but it had books in different languages, French, English, Arabic, and some others. She laughed softly. I would spend hours there reading slowly, trying to understand. Sometimes I didn't know what the words meant, but I kept going. Richard could see the fire in her eyes. That must have been very hard. It was, Amara agreed. But I wanted to speak with people from other places. I wanted to hear their stories and tell my own. Amara paused, her smile fading for a moment. There were days when I felt alone, when I wondered if I was wasting my time. But I remembered my parents' words. Education is the key to your future. Richard nodded, feeling a new respect for her strength. Did you have teachers? Amara shook her head. No, not really. There was no language teacher in my town. I taught myself using books, music, and listening to the radio. I would write down new words and practice every day. Richard was amazed. You did all this on your own? Yes, Amara said proudly. I even used the internet when I could to talk to people from other countries. They helped me learn the right words and correct my mistakes. Richard smiled. You have a strong will. Amara looked at him and smiled back. I learned that nothing is impossible if you believe. Suddenly, Richard's phone rang. It was a call from his office. He excused himself and answered quickly, but his mind was still on Amara's story. When he finished, he looked at her and said, I want to do more for you. Not just help you learn or travel, but help you reach others who dream like you. Amara's eyes shone with hope. That would be wonderful. Richard explained, I want to start a program, a place where children from small towns like yours can learn languages. They shouldn't have to struggle alone like you did. Amara felt a warmth in her heart. That could change many lives. Richard nodded. Yes, and I want you to be a part of it, to teach, to inspire, to lead. Amara's mind raced with ideas. She imagined children in small towns, learning to speak new languages, connecting with the world beyond their homes. But her past was not the only challenge she faced. There were people who did not believe in her, people who thought her story was too good to be true. One evening, as Amara prepared for a speech at a local event, she received a message. It said, no one can speak 9 languages. You're lying. Amara's heart sank. She wanted to ignore it, but the words stung. Richard saw her sadness and put a hand on her shoulder. Don't listen to them. Your story is real. Your words are real. Amara took a deep breath. I know, but sometimes the world is slow to believe in people like me. Richard nodded. Then we will show them. Together they worked harder. They collected videos of Amara speaking in different languages. They asked friends and teachers to share their stories. Slowly, the truth spread. At the event, Amara stood before a crowd of hundreds. She began to speak in English, telling her story, the struggles, the hope, the long nights studying by candlelight. Then, one by one, she spoke in French, Spanish, Mandarin, Japanese, Arabic, Swahili, Russian, German, and Hindi. Each language was clear and beautiful, filling the room with the power of her voice. The crowd was silent, then erupted in applause. Many came forward to thank her, inspired by her journey. Richard watched proudly. You did it, Amara smiled, feeling stronger than ever. I did not do it alone. I had help and belief. After the event, a young girl approached Amara. She held a small notebook. I want to learn languages too, she said shyly. Will you help me? Amara knelt down and took the girl's hand. Of course. We will learn together. That moment made Amara realize the true power of her gift. It was not just about speaking many languages, it was about opening hearts and minds. As she walked home that night, Amara looked up at the stars. She thought about her past, her present, and the future. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges and doubts. But she also knew she was ready, because her story was not just hers. It belonged to everyone who dreamed of a better world. And with every language she spoke, Amara was building bridges, one word at a time. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow through the tall windows of the cafe where Amara and Richard often met. It had been months since their first meeting, and their friendship had grown stronger. The millionaire businessman and the young woman who spoke 9 languages had formed a bond built on respect and a shared dream. That evening, Richard invited Amara for a quiet cup of coffee. He wanted to talk not about business but about life. As they sat together, Richard looked across the table at Amara. You've taught me many things, he said softly. But there is one lesson I am still trying to understand. Amara raised an eyebrow, curious. What is that? Richard took a deep breath. I have always believed that success means money, power, and control. I spent years chasing those things. But now I'm not so sure. Amara smiled gently. You're learning something important. Richard nodded slowly. Yes, watching you, I've seen a different kind of success. One that comes from passion, courage, and kindness. Amara looked down at her coffee cup. Success is different for everyone. For me, it means using what I have to help others. Speaking languages is not just about words, it's about connecting with people and understanding their stories. Richard leaned back in his chair. I used to think only rich people mattered, but now I see that everyone has something valuable to offer. Amara's eyes shone. That is true. Every person's voice deserves to be heard. For a moment, they sat in silence, each thinking about their own lives. Then Richard said, Tell me more about your travels. How did you use your languages to connect with people? Amara smiled, remembering. When I first started traveling, I was nervous. I was alone in new places with no one to guide me. But when I spoke the local language, even just a little, something changed. People smiled. They helped me. I made friends. Richard listened closely, fascinated by her stories. In Spain, Amara continued, I stayed with a family who taught me traditional recipes. We laughed together even though my Spanish was not perfect. In China, she said, I joined a small community where people welcomed me because I tried to speak Mandarin. Each language was a key that opened a door. Richard smiled. You have a gift. Amara shook her head. It is not a gift, but a choice. I chose to learn and to listen. That made all the difference. Richard looked thoughtful. I want to do the same. I want to listen more, to understand the people I work with. Amara reached across the table and placed her hand gently on his. It's never too late to start. Their conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the cafe door. A young man entered and approached their table. He looked nervous but determined. Excuse me, he said softly. Are you Amara? Amara nodded. Yes, I am. The young man smiled shyly. My name is Daniel. I heard about your language program and I want to join. I want to learn and travel like you. Amara's face lit up. Welcome, Daniel. We are happy to have you. Richard looked at Daniel with approval. You see? This is why your story matters. Amara turned to Richard. Every person who learns a new language opens their heart. That creates a better world. Richard nodded slowly. I think you are right. Maybe success is not just about what we achieve, but how we help others achieve. Amara smiled. That is the lesson I want to share. The three of them talked late into the evening, planning classes, trips, and ways to bring people together through language and culture. After Daniel left, Richard and Amara stayed behind, watching the city lights twinkle outside. Richard sighed. I'm grateful I met you, Amara. You've changed my life. Amara smiled softly. And you've changed mine. The night grew darker, but inside the cafe a new light had begun to shine, a light of understanding, friendship, and hope. For Amara, the lesson was clear. True success comes from love, learning, and the courage to be yourself. And with every language she spoke, she was building a bridge not only between countries but between hearts. Would you like me to continue with part 5, or would you prefer any changes to this part? You said, part 5. 1500 words ka lekho or interesting hona chahiye or third person style ma lekhni ha or simple basic English ka. Don't use any violated word. So please avoid any violated content. ChatGPT said absolutely. Here is part 5. The conclusion of your story. In simple and engaging third-person style, around 1500 words, clean and meaningful as requested. Part 5. The Bridge. The months passed quickly, but Amara's journey was far from over. With Richard's help, she had started a small language school in her hometown. The school was not fancy, but it was full of hope and laughter. Children who had never dreamed of learning a new language now sat eagerly in classrooms, repeating words, singing songs, and sharing stories from faraway places. Amara watched them with pride. She saw herself in their eyes, a spark of curiosity and a hunger to learn. She knew this was the real success, the true meaning of her journey. One afternoon, as the sun poured through the windows, Amara was teaching a group of children when Richard entered the room. He carried a large envelope and wore a bright smile. Good news, he said, placing the envelope on her desk. We have received a grant to expand the school. This means we can hire more teachers, buy more books, and reach even more children. The children cheered. Amara's heart swelled with happiness. She looked at Richard and said, "This will change many lives." Richard nodded. "Just like you said, it's about helping others." Later that evening, Amara and Richard sat outside the school, watching the stars appear one by one. The air was cool and peaceful. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Richard asked with a smile. Amara laughed. "You laughed when I told you I spoke 9 languages." Richard chuckled. "I did. I was wrong to doubt you." Amara nodded. "And you were brave to come back and support me." They sat quietly for a moment, letting the memories fill the night. Then Amara said softly, "I want to tell you something. Speaking 9 languages is not about being better than anyone else. It's about respect for people, their culture, and their stories." Richard looked at her, understanding. "You've built more than a school. You've built a bridge?" Amara smiled. "Yes, a bridge between hearts and worlds." Their work had attracted attention from many places. Soon invitations arrived for Amara to speak at conferences and workshops around the country. She traveled with Richard, sharing her message. That language is a tool for peace and understanding. One day at a large international event, Amara stood on a stage before thousands. She spoke in her 9 languages, one after another, and then said, "Language is more than words. It is the voice of humanity. When we learn to listen, we learn to care." The audience rose to their feet, applauding with tears in their eyes. Backstage, Richard hugged her. "You have changed the world, Amara." She shook her head humbly. "We changed it together." But Amara never forgot her roots. She returned often to her hometown, visiting the school, talking to children, and encouraging their dreams. One afternoon, as she walked through the market, she saw the same group of men who had once doubted her. They looked surprised but smiled politely. "You have done well," one of them said. "We were wrong," Amara nodded. "Thank you. It's never too late to believe." Her story spread beyond languages. It became a story of hope, courage, and the power of dreams. As years passed, Amara continued to learn new languages, meet new people, and build new bridges. Her school grew into a community center where art, music, and stories were shared in many tongues. Richard stayed by her side, no longer just a businessman but a true friend and partner in their mission. One evening, as they sat by the river, watching the water flow gently, Richard asked, "What's next for you, Amara?" She looked at the stars, then back at him. The journey never ends. There are always more hearts to connect, more stories to hear, and more languages to learn. Richard smiled, "And I will be with you every step." Together they dreamed of a world where no one was afraid to speak, to listen, and to understand. Amara's voice, once doubted and laughed at, had become a beacon of light. And in that light the world grew a little smaller and a little kinder. One word, one language, one heart at a time.